Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Once upon a time, there was a little princess called Snow White, who had a cruel stepmother who was jealous of her. The queen had a magic mirror which could speak to her, and when she looked into it and asked who was the most beautiful lady in the land, the mirror told her that she was, for she was very beautiful. But as Snow White grew up, she became even more beautiful than her stepmother, and the mirror told the queen this. So the queen ordered one of her huntsmen to take Snow White away and kill her. But he was too kind-hearted to be able to do this, so he left Snow White in the woods and told her to run away and escape. Snow White wandered about in the woods, not knowing what to do, until she came to a house belonging to 7 little dwarfs. The little dwarfs were kind and allowed Snow White to come in and live with them. Every day Snow White would make their 7 little beds and cook meals for the 7 little men, and for a while they were all quite happy. One day, however, the queen asked her magic mirror who was the most beautiful lady in the land. How surprised she was to hear the mirror reply that Snow White was the most beautiful. The queen had believed Snow White to be dead. She decided that Snow White really must die, so she disguised herself as an old lady selling pretty combs. She cast a spell over the comb so that it would poison Snow White once she used it to comb her hair. Then the queen set off for the little house where Snow White lived with the 7 dwarfs. When Snow White heard the knocking on the door, she peeped out of the window and said, "Hello there, what do you have to sell?" "Combs, pretty hair combs," replied the old woman. Snow White opened the door and allowed the old woman to comb her hair. The minute the old lady put the poisoned comb in her hair, Snow White fell down as though she were dead. When the 7 dwarfs came home, they found poor Snow White on the floor, and suspecting the bad queen was to blame, they began looking around to try and find the cause. They soon found the comb and pulled it out of Snow White's hair, and to their great happiness, Snow White came to life again. When the queen got home, she again asked her magic mirror who was the most beautiful lady in the world. "Snow White," replied the mirror, and the queen was angry. She couldn't believe that Snow White was still alive. She planned to make an end of her for good, so she disguised herself as a different old lady, made a poisoned apple, and set off once again for the 7 dwarfs' cottage. Snow White opened the door to the old lady and took the apple. As soon as she took a bite, it stuck in her throat and choked her. The little dwarfs arrived home and found Snow White on the floor, and this time they could not bring her back to life. They were heartbroken. They made a beautiful glass coffin and put Snow White into it. As they were carrying her away to bury her, they met a prince who fell in love with Snow White and begged the dwarfs to give her to him. The dwarfs felt so sorry for the love-struck prince that they agreed, and the prince's servants were about to carry the glass coffin away when they tripped and fell over the root of a tree. They lost their balance, and the coffin that they were carrying wobbled so much that the piece of poisonous apple stuck in Snow White's throat came loose, and she sat up alive and well again. The prince was delighted, and the 2 of them got married. The prince, Snow White, and the dwarfs lived happily ever after, but the wicked stepmother came to a bad end, and no one felt at all sorry for her.